So over here in externalizing the bean configuration, what we have is we have get the string config file. So in this string config file, let me maximize the screen. Okay, fine. Over here if you see, okay, we are writing this external element, property place, folder configure. So property place, so the first, okay, point number one, what you need to do is, let me take help of the notepad. You need to create a file called jdbc properties. So once you create this file, so in this jdbc.properties file, what are we doing is, it is taking too long. Now over here you're keeping the URL, driver, username, and then the password. So from this property file, okay, from this property, okay, you are going to read the URL, driver name, username, and the password from this properties file into your application. So first, okay, you have created the jdbc property file, wherein, okay, what you have written over here is you have configured username, URL, driver name, and then the password. These four things we have done. And this is the step one what you have done. Now next is, okay, we need to access these values in our Spring application. We need to access these values in our Spring application. So in order to access these values into the Spring application, we are making use of a built-in bean. We are making use of a built-in bean called property placeholder configure. This is the built-in bean that is provided by the Spring framework. Property placeholder configure. To this one, okay, you are providing the location. Location is equal to jdbc.properties. So when you're providing the location to this bean, what it does is it will read your properties file and it will create a properties object out of it. It will read your properties file and it will create a properties object. This one, properties is equal to system.getProperty. That is going to create an object out of that. Now what it does is it is a hash map. So it is going to let me delete these columns. So it is going to create a hash map that is driver name com dot, I'm not going to write it completely, com.xql, that's something, and then URL is xxx, username, root, and then password is again root. So this is what it is going to do. So let me send this backward. So this is how it works. Clear on this? Now after it reads this, then what we want is we want the Spring to create a JDBC object. After it reads this, okay, we want the Spring to create the JDBC object for us. So again, in order to create the JDBC object, you are making use of built-in bean called driver manager data source. You are making use of this built-in object to use this driver manager data source. So now whenever you want to establish the connection with the database, okay, that is one of the built-in class which you can use. So now this driver manager data source, what it is going to do is, again it requires four things when it wants to connect to the database. Okay, four properties it requires. So one is your driver. So one is your driver, second is URL, username, and then the password. So from where it is going to retrieve all these four values for driver name, URL, username, and password. It is going to retrieve these values from this. So driver name, and then you have got URL, and then you have got username and password. So it is going to retrieve the value from this file. So this is how it works. Driver, URL, username, and then the password. So your driver, given it's reads a case, so driver name is com.mysql.jdbc.driver, and then next what you have is URL something xxx, but the fully qualified name, the correct name, and then okay, username. But in order to retrieve this, okay, this is how you will be writing dollar of database dot username. This is how you're going to retrieve, and then dollar of database dot password. And then similarly, okay, for the rest of this thing, okay, once you get all this, then your Spring, what it does is it will establish the connection with the database. Your Spring is going to establish the connection with the database. And the name what it is giving to this bean is something, again, you can give some user defined name. The name, let's say, okay, I'm giving this the name to this bean as data source. Let's say I'm giving the name to this bean as data source. So this is the name what we're giving to this bean, and we can access this in our application. Clear on this? Any doubts? This is called as externalization. That is, you are placing the configuration in a separate file. Do we have any questions on this? Okay, let us proceed. Now first we have created the properties file. Now next let me go to the Spring config file, and I'll delete all this stuff. Now if I have to add this, what I can do is I can go over here to the beans tab. Once I go to this data source, it represents the connection to the database. You can click over here, browse, and then again you can search for the bean property placeholder configure. It selects this. You can give the ID. Click next. You can add the values. Value what you're adding is locations, location, and the name of the file is jdbc properties. Click OK, and then you can click finish. So the bean is added. Okay, over here the bean is added. So either you can type it or you can configure it with the help of the IDE. I'm configuring it with the help of the IDE. Now the second one what we require is driver manager data source. So driver manager data source. So we are creating this data source. Click next. So driver class name, we have value is dollar of database dot driver name. I need to check this. The second one what we are having is, one is driver name, second is URL. URL is dollar of database dot URL, and then you have got username dollar of database dot username, and the next what you're having is password dollar of database dot password. Done. Click finish. So let me just check this. URL, username, driver, find password, driver class URL. This is only driver. What is the name given? Only driver we have given. So let me just change this. Okay, done. Now again over here, the same stuff we are doing. Application context is got the new class path application context spring config file. You are reading this file, and if context is not equal to null, you need to retrieve the data source bean. So data source is equal to context dot get bean, and this is data source, that is the name of the bean, and the class name is driver manager data source class. Now once we have retrieved this, again you can check if data source is not equal to null, connection has been established. Right, like
Atika,
yeah.
could you go back to that Spring config XML, please?
Which one?
Spring config XML.
Okay.
So where we had the properties down, right? So I didn't understand this part. So we have a bean there, which is a property configurator, and it picks up all the properties from the file. That's fine. But then in the data source bean, you used database.uri, database.username. How does this relate to the property configurator?
Okay. Now look, over here as we have said, when you do this internally, it is creating this object. Internally, it has created this object property placeholder configure location is equal to jdbc.properties. Wherein again we are just writing name in the value pair. Using that, it has created this properties. Now, the second step, what we are doing is whenever you're using this one, the symbol $of, whenever you're using $of database.url, now how your Spring container is going to check is, first it's going to check whether is there any element by property place folder configure. If there is a bean by this name, first the Spring container will check over your first preference, will check into this object if there are any properties that are available by the name what you are trying to retrieve, database.url. If in case if this is not available, then it is going to check in your system properties. And otherwise, okay, it is going to check in the file name whatever you have specified. This is the order in which it is going to check. So because we have the property placeholder configure defined, so no, first one, okay, it will check into this, then as you said, okay, system properties, okay, then your properties hash map, not file, because from file it cannot. So properties hash map, okay, this is the order in which it is going to check. So because we have already defined like a property placeholder config, it will first check into that, and because it is available, it will retrieve the element from there.
So we can have multiple property files also, right? So how will it do that?
Because over here we are specifying the location, jdbc.properties.
Right. So if I have another property file, I don't know, something else, message properties.
Okay. Now look over here, you see, okay, we are having multiple properties file. So what I have is menu underscore en dot. So over here we are having two properties files. Okay, now let us test this. Connection established. So you can have the multiple. So internally this is how it is going to work. So you have got two properties files as you said, jdbc.properties, menu.properties. In fact, okay, it can accept multiple values.
So what happened? So here basically we in the data source down below you used database.url. So is it going to go and check first in JDBC properties, and if it doesn't find it goes to many properties? Or how, because my question is, okay, let's say if I have a
Okay,
property
what we
which
will
is
do
having the
is,
same name.
yeah, we'll do the same thing. So first we'll check the order in whichever you have specified. Over here we have this, okay, I'll paste it over here also. Once it finds it, okay, it stops. Once it it'll do it in the order whatever you have written. So once it finds the data, it stops its search.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, well, and let's say okay, you're having different properties file. Let's say 1, 2, 3. Let's say okay, you are using one database in the production environment and you are using the another one in the testing environment. Let's say okay, this is the case if you're having. Then in that case, okay, you have got profiles. So you can select okay whether you want testing profile or production, because when you are moving from one stage to the another stage, you may change production, like First, you might be into the development database, then test database, then production database. So again, Spring provides you with the profile configuration wherein you can specify which database or which configuration to use at what stage. So you can go ahead with the profiles.
Okay.
So anyway, that we'll be covering in the coming sessions.
Now, one other question is, can we use this dollar like to read the properties inside the code or only in the XML file?
No, it is only in the XML file.
So we cannot read properties in the code?
Now we can read it with the help of a class called resource loader or resource.
Okay.
We can read it. Now let us read the properties. Over here, okay, we are having this. Now let us read the properties. So resource, let's say if I want to read this, resource is equal to context dot get resource of what is that, jdbc dot properties. So once you have this resource element, the next you can get the input stream on this resource is equal to resource dot get input stream. So once you get the input stream on this resource, so that is going to throw an exception. I'll use enter the rate throws. And then I can make use of the scanner is equal to new scanner of stream. And then you can make use of the while loop to loop through the while scanner dot has next. Right click, run as. You can feel it. Rather than creating the object and the Spring Bean configuration file, like if you want, okay, you can create here also. Let's say, okay, you are driver manager. Over here, you can also create driver manager data source. Data source is equal to new driver manager data source. The URL driver name, okay, fine, we need to set it. So you need to set the URL, username, and the password. URL, username, and password, and then you need to set the driver dot set driver class name com dot mysql dot jdbc dot driver. So this is how you can set it. Data source dot set. Oh yes, set URL is, so I don't remember, xxx, and then data source dot set username, data source dot set password. Now, it's same thing. Okay, we have done it, but we have done it using the string configuration file. Sorry.
So
Hmm.
this was exactly my question. So here in this approach, where you wrote root, is how would I read from the properties file, the root, and not to hard code it?
Okay. Now over here, okay, what are we doing is we are reading one element over here from this properties file. Okay, you are reading all these values: database.url, database.driver, username, and then the password. Stream dot. One minute. We are having a method called load properties. One minute. Let me just Google it. A direct method we are having to load the properties. See over here, file input string.
I think of the property config, the what was that, the class, the one
Huh?
that we used. Wouldn't, because we have a bean configured, doesn't, we cannot just use that, get that bean. Maybe there might be some methods in that. I don't know.
As a property
The
configure method. Ah yeah, that way
yeah.
also you can do it. New driver. So okay, fine. You want to get access to that property configure. So conf
Right, because the access
dot
is already there.
yeah get b what we did, right? Properties. What is the name we have given? So directly you can access this. Context get b. So configure dot it has just got the methods to set, I guess.
Oh, there is no get.
No, there is no get over here. We don't have get method over
Okay.
here.
Okay.
One second, let us check which object is this. New driver manager. This is also accepting the same object. Properties only you require. URL and this is properties. We have got a direct method in this to load it. I'm unable to recall it. So stream, I think it is associated with the file, I guess. Let me just check it. One minute, let us have a reference to that. Okay, I couldn't recollect the method, but we have got a direct method that will help you to load those properties fine. Oh yeah, we don't have. I don't remember in which chapter it is.
I was just googling it. I think there is a properties class that you might need to
Properties
use.
class is there. Load properties.
Yeah, just properties. Yeah. So,
Properties.
Yeah, there is so we can see
What is the syntax for that? Properties dot load properties.
new properties. Yeah, I can ping you this link. It has an example.
Okay.
So basically, this is the only way to. I mean, we
Yeah.
cannot use the Spring way to load properties somehow. Okay.
This one, yes. Property dot load. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I was just trying it on. Oh, yeah. Okay. Fine. Property. This one. Yeah. Correct. Properties dot load of input stream. Properties is equal to new properties. Yeah. Correct. Properties dot load of stream. And then okay, you need to specify this URL. Right, like select run as Java application. Connection established. So this is the another way. Now next what we have is, so this is how you can read the data, and now let's say, okay, I think we did not cover. Let me close all the stuff. Why it has become so slow? So this is what we, if in case, okay, if you have multiple properties, okay, then you can go with the locations attribute and you can keep on adding locations, and this is the list element what you have, list, and then again you can keep on adding the multiple values, jdbc properties, security properties, xxx, whatever you want to add. And then okay, we have also covered this. So the cycle what we have is, like whenever the Spring container creates the life cycle of the bean within the Spring Bean Factory container, first it will instantiate, then populate the properties, then bean name away, set bean name method it will call bean factory, then pre-initialization, then again bean post processor, and initializing the bean after properties as set, and then call custom init method post initialization bean is ready to use, and disposable beans destroy method and call custom destroy method. So this is the life cycle of this. Okay, we will be discussing this one by one, okay, because it is not possible to discuss everything in one go. Okay, but before we move to AOP, let us cover a few more concepts. Okay, fine. Now let us create a new package called com.example.mindsmap.model. Over here, let us create a class called contacts. In this package, okay, we are creating a class called contacts. So over here, we have got certain names like private string, contact name. We will keep contact ID as well, private string to contact ID, contact name, private string, contact number. And it should have no argument or the constructor with argument based on how you are initializing it. We'll keep a default constructor, and then you need to have the public getter and the setter methods, and then again we will keep a toString method. So this is your model class. Now after we have created a model class, we'll create one more class. So you'll create contact DAO class, contacts DAO. So basically, again, this is an interface, and in this interface, what we will be doing is we will be writing all the CRUD operations. I'll write one, okay, you will be writing the rest of the operation. So for this, let us create a separate package called DAO, Data Access Object class. So let us place it in a separate package called DAO, com.example.mindsmap.dao, and then create a separate class called contacts DAO. Basically, this is an interface. Let me change the access specifier to interface. Now over here, you will be writing all the CRUD operations. So you have got public void or public integer insert contact. Contacts, okay, fine. We have written contacts. Public integer delete contact. You can specify the contact ID. And then you have got public list contacts. Find all, like get all the contacts. And like, okay, you can provide an overloaded method to it. Public list contacts get all string contact name. Based on the contact name, okay, you can get all the contacts. So let us import this package java.util.list and done. Now you need to provide an interface, implementation for this interface. So in order to provide the implementation for this interface, new class contacts DAO IMPL. Now, in order to do this, what you require is you require connection to the data source. You require connection to the data source object java.sql.data source. Please select this one and then implements contacts DAO. You need to write the code to implement all the methods. So add and implemented methods. So this is the stuff what we have. Okay, later on, okay, we will implement all this. I'll just show one. Okay, you can implement rest of the methods. Now, okay, you need to register this bean with your Spring configuration file, and this bean is referring to the data source object. This bean is referring to the data source object. So already we have the data source object created. Let me just delete this. This is your Spring Bean container. Your Spring Bean container has already created a data source object that has established the connection with the database. Now you are creating one more bean in your application, and what we are expecting is that this bean is having the reference to your data source object. So this bean has got reference to your data source object. This is what we have. So we need to configure this in the Spring file. So let me go to the Spring config file. Okay, you can go over here, click onto the Beans tab, click over here new bean. So classes, what is the class name? Contacts DAO implementation. So contacts DAO implementation. You can provide the ID contacts DAO IM. Click next. Properties. Yes, we have got the properties, that is data source. Property is data source and it is referring to the data source bean. There is one error. I think small case we might have written. Oh, we need to check. Oh yeah, I think I did not save this. Yeah, it was there. Oh yeah, I did not save that. So now let me do that. Repeat it. Click new bean and the bean ID, it's contacts DAO IMPL, and then specify the class. Click next. Add it. Data source references. Property name is unknown. I don't know why it is giving this. Okay, let me do it from here. So bean ID is equal to, what is that? Contacts DAO IMPL. Class is equal to com.example.mm.dao.contacts DAO IMPL. Yeah. And over here we are having a property name, that is data source. Yeah, it's not picking up. And this one is referring to oh sorry, the reason it did not detect it was because we did not provide it setter and getter methods for this. So you need to provide the setter and the getter methods. Okay, this is the reason again it did not listed that it was giving, so it is configured. So what are we doing over here is this data source reference again means again it is going to refer to this bean. Clear with this? Okay. Now let us come back to this. So over here you already have the connection object, and you need not write any get connection and all method. Okay, directly okay, you will get a data source connection object over here. Set data source, insert, private string final. This also you have to write it in properties file. Insert statement is equal to insert into contacts. So what are the fields which we have given us? Contact ID, contact name we have given, contact ID, name and contact number I guess. Contact number, values. This is our regular way of doing. Then we will make use of the prepaid statement provided by the Spring framework. So this is your insert statement, and then again we need to write one more statement for creating it. Create statement. So create table contacts. Contact ID, okay, we'll keep everything as varchar. Varchar of 20. Let me copy this. So we have got these two statements ready. So after your connection is established with the data source, what we will do is we will write a method called initialization method. So private, so public void initialize. So in this initialize method, okay, we'll try to set up the database. That is, we will try to put some contacts. What are we doing? Okay, fine. Data source. So it is returning you a connection object. You need to import the stuff. Import java.sql connection. And then okay, regular prepaid statement. is equal to con dot prepare statement of so let it handle all types of exception. So con dot and then pst dot set. So everything what we have is string. First one contact ID, pst dot execute. Execute update. Done. This is one, and let me add one more. Like there is nothing to explain over here because we are already familiar with all this stuff. So what are we going to do is, now I want this method to be called automatically. I want this method to be called automatically. So for that what we can do is, you can go to the Spring config file and over here you can specify and its method is equal to initialize. So this method will be called automatically. Any questions on this? This one, init method. So it will call the init method of this, sorry, it will call the initialize method of this class, wherein it is going to initialize the database. So database initialized. So let us try to execute this. Where is our test file? So let me create one more test file and name it as contacts test. So main method we have, and then okay, write application context is equal to new class path application context. Its name is spring config.xml. Press Ctrl Shift O to add the imports, and then what is that bean name? Contacts DAO is equal to get reference to the bean contacts.get bean of contacts, DAOIMPL. Let us execute this. Right click, run as Java application. Oh, error. Okay, table April contacts does not exist because we did not create a table by name contacts. So let us go back to this and over here let me use this create statement. pst.execute. So database initialize. If you observe over here, we did not call the init method initialize method because we have specified that as an argument to the bean in the string config file. It has automatically invoked the initialize method. Clear on this? Anyway, is it clear till here? We did not do anything. Okay, what are we doing is we have just written the regular jdbc code and we are using that in and we are initializing that through the Spring config file. That's it, nothing more than that. Any questions on this? If you have questions, you can ask, otherwise I'll proceed. Okay, no questions, let us proceed. After we are done with this, let me use this control shift. We have a separate class that is configurable application context. That is, the Spring Bean will call all the init method as well as, okay, we have got the destroy method also. We have got two methods, one is init, the second one is destroy method. So in the init method, you will write the code to initialize the system, whereas in the public void destroy or cleanup method, you will write the code to release all the connections. So data source, okay, you can just set this reference to null. System out, released. So over here you can write the code for releasing the resources. So when we go to the Spring config file, uh, So you have your string configuration file, string config file. And the string config file, we have got another method called the destroy method. So this is the destroy method. So what is that we have written? I think clone, not clean up. Thank you. So let me just check it. What do we have? Context DAO implementation. So this is the method. Now let us just test that using contacts test. Contacts dot close. When you're closing it, it is going to call your destroy method. So when the app context is being initialized, it calls the init method. When the context is being destroyed, it calls the release method. So right click, run as Java application. No bean name contacts DAO. So I think there is some error in the bean name, what I have written. Contacts DAO implementation. Run as Java application. Sorry, this is Spring config. Right click, run as Java application. Okay, table contacts already exists, it says. Like in this case, you need to drop the table first. Like this is all we are doing again. This is all done by Spring. We are doing all this manually, but you need not do this. Spring will do it. Anyway, that also we are going to check. Let us try it. So here you see, okay, it is closing it. Context.close, but why it did not invoke? I think I did not save the file. Clean up. Spring config. Destroy method cleanup is there. Let us execute it one more time because it should, like when we are closing the context, at that time it will call the release method, cleanup method. Oh, it wasn't safe, I guess. So database initialized and then released. Init and then the destroy. And one more thing what we have to discuss is the auto voiding. Auto voiding is Now over here you have written this context DO implementation and you are avoiding this one. That is, you are mapping this data source to this one. Rather than you writing this, okay, you want this to be done automatically. Rather than you writing this, you want it to be done automatically. For that, okay, we have got auto wire. So you can specify by name. So by name, when you're specifying, it will look for the bean by name data source. If there is a bean by the name data source, then automatically it will auto wire. Clear with this? Is this clear? Auto wire by name. This one, auto wire by name. So what we are doing is, this is called as a wiring concept. You are connecting one bean to the another bean, but we are doing this manually. But when you specify auto wire by name, it will check if there is a bean by name data source. It will check if there is a bean by name data source. If it is there, then it will automatically auto wire this. It will establish the association between context DO implementation and your data source. Is this clear, auto wiring concept? So, again, okay, you can run and test it. Right click, run as. I don't know whether I have saved or not. Fine. So that is auto wire by name. Now the last thing what we have is, you can eliminate this. You can eliminate this completely. So rather than writing this much, auto writing concept is, rather than you writing this property name is equal to data source, reference is equal to data source. Rather than you specifying, okay, this line, you can omit this line and can specify auto wire by name. You can specify auto wire by name. So it will check if there is a bean by name data source. If there is a bean by the name data source, then if it finds a bean by name data source, it will establish the connection association. It will establish the association between the context class and this. Generally, okay, what we are doing is, okay, we are having a data source class, and this is your data source, and this is your context class. This is your context class, context DO implementation class. Now, if you have to establish the association between these two, this is called as establishing the association. So if you have to establish the association between these two, okay, you're using this property, you're writing this. Oh, difficult to write. So property, I cannot write it completely. So property, okay, this tag you're writing, property name is equal to data source, and then reference is equal to this thing, okay, this stuff you're writing. So rather than you writing this stuff, what you are doing is, so rather than you writing the property one stuff, so what you have is, you have this data source and then you have the contacts. And then, okay, you want to establish the relationship between these two. So what are we specifying is auto wire by name. Rather than writing this property element, if you specify auto wire by name, it will establish this link automatically. You need not specify. Clear with this? Auto wire by name. Is it clear? Okay, fine. So all the configuration, what you can do is, either you can do it through XML, or you can do it using annotation. Two choices you have. What I can do is, okay, I can eliminate this completely. Control shift. So if I eliminate this, what I can do is I can go to this contact DAO implementation class. I can give the name to this at the rate, sorry, if you have to use annotations, like rather than configure it in the XML file, if you want to make use of the annotations, you should tell to your Spring container that you are using annotations in your applications. For that purpose, okay, you need to add a namespace called context. So you need to, where is that context? Okay, you need to add this namespace. So once you have added this namespace, see over here, a new namespace has been added. With the help of this namespace, you will tell the Spring container context dot you're making use of annotations and context dot component scan, that is where are your component present. So it is present in com.example.mindsmap package. So all your classes are present within this com.example.mindsmap package. So your Spring container, rather than, okay, because we're not going to write anything, we're not going to write all this stuff over here. Okay, only let the data source be there because we need to define that. And right, this one, okay, this stuff, okay, we have commented it. So rather than this, it is, you need to go to this file and for the database at the rate repository, you can specify contacts DAO implementation. For database, okay, you'll specify it as a repository. Why, we will discuss that. And okay, you want this data source. And we have specified auto wiring property for this. Auto wired. Done. Clear with this? And for this one, you can specify at the rate post construct. And for this one, you can specify at the rate pre destroy. So same thing, we are just making use of annotations. So let me just revise it. So over here on the class, you have annotated with at the rate contacts ID. So 1 minute.
Atika,
Yeah.
can you explain from the start the annotations topic? Like you created something in this beans graph context thing, something,
Okay.
right?
Okay. In order to use the annotations, you need to add these two elements. Context colon annotation config. That is, you need to make your Spring container aware that you are using annotations in your application. I repeat, if you are using annotation, first you need to make your Spring container aware that you are using annotations in your application. For that, okay, you are adding this context colon annotation config. And then okay, you have to specify where are your classes. Components can, because your Spring container will automatically search for the classes. So you are specifying the location of the folder or the package where your classes are present, com.example.mindsmap.star. I'll just delete this and do it one more time. So in order to add those two things, you need to go to this namespaces. I hope namespace screen is visible.
I think I'm actually not really following this. You mentioned talking about annotations, but I have no idea what that is.
Okay.
And what is the use of this in this context? I mean, I'm not following.
Okay. 1 minute, I'll explain that. So I'll tell you, okay, I will go with the annotation. So over here, you're adding this context. Done. And you go back to the source. So this is added. I'll explain you what is annotations. So if you want context colon annotation config, means you're using the annotations, and the second one is context colon component scan. Base package is com.example.mindsmap. Stuff. So you're telling to the Spring container that you're using the annotations, and it should scan for all the packages, so for all the classes that are present in this. So we have got this class contacts. So over here we have got two classes. One is contacts DO implementation and then the contacts class. In this package, you're having two classes. One is contacts class, and so we need to write the name. And one minute, let me come back. And this CDAO file. So this is your package. This is your package, com.example, this one. This is your package. So when you are specifying this base package is com.example.mm, so what your Spring container is going to do is the Spring container, let me just, okay, this is your Spring container. So your Spring container will go to this package. The Spring container will go to this package, and whichever classes are annotated, let's say, okay, this class is annotated at the rate something repository. This is annotated at the rate repository. So your Spring container, whichever classes, not all the classes, whichever classes are annotated, it will create an object for that. So it is going to create an object for CDA. Is these two lines clear? This one, is this line clear? Context column component scan. Base package is equal to com.example.mm.
No, for me, no.
Okay. For Roma and Hima, is it clear? Forward.
I think we might need to first understand what is annotation, why they are used, and
Annotations, the reason you go for the annotation is, now look over here, what are you doing? Configuration. Yeah.
Is that the same annotation we used to use it not to have the code for XML mapping? Is that the reason we use annotation, or is different?
Yes, it is the same.
Okay, so you don't have to write the XML5 mapping, right? Just
Yes.
having annotation code. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Okay, what we will do is, okay, we will cover that yesterday, annotations in XML concept. I'll just make a PPT for that, okay, so that it will be clear, because it is difficult to draw over here. We'll park that concept to the next, to the tomorrow's class, the annotations and the difference
yeah, I
between
think
the
that will
XML.
be
Yeah, we'll park
that will
that.
be very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I'll make PPT and then we'll do that. Okay. Because it is very much difficult to draw over here. Tomorrow we'll do that. Okay, then we'll wind up for today. See you tomorrow.